If I didn't know better, I'd say it's day 197 of a screenwriter's journey, and I don't know better because it is. I think that logic holds up. It is in the world of writing, it's February 13th. In the world of voiceover, it's March 26th. So pretty close to 6 weeks. And a lot has happened since then in the world. Um, Not that that would affect my writing, but it's interesting to think of what's happened. Well, I won't go into the politics. All right. So, what we're doing now. So, again, here's I think I mentioned this yesterday, this worker in the nature center. One more person who could either be a valuable addition to the cast or could be another expense that we don't really need, because I'm keeping a tight watch, a close eye, a close watch, a tight eye on production expenses as I write this, which I've commented on before, kind of a silly thing to do, but something in the back of my mind nonetheless. I do have another script I want to send this producer that would be more like a $5 or $10 million picture, or who knows, maybe more than that. So we've got Abby in there, Luke and or Holly in there, Luke and Abby chatting in the car, or looks at the window, out the window, maybe that should be. So they're just sitting there. So again, I say this every time I go back to these scenes. It just feels like dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I've determined that I need to do a little work on this story, not the script itself, these little rewrites, but the story. And it's interesting that when you write, as you write, sometimes you get caught up in the scene and you're trying to improve the dialogue, and you're not really thinking, well, you're always thinking, how does this affect the story? But you're not thinking, this scene doesn't work in the story, and I'm just working on it because I know it's necessary. And then there's sometimes when you get into writing and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I need this scene, or where is this scene going? What is it telling us? Is it developing character? Is it furthering the plot? All that kind of stuff. Ticking clock, good news, bad news, et cetera, et cetera. So it's something that should always be on your mind. I think as you write, and even if you're one of those people, and I don't know what the percentage is, that does these complete outlines and beat sheets and index cards and notes and treatments and synopsis and all that stuff. To me, the synopsis I usually write afterwards if I'm trying to pitch it to someone. But even then, those are just so hard for me to write. I don't know if I would like to hear from people of how hard they are to write, and hence how much you dislike writing them. It's almost like log lines. I really need to, on the one sense, it's nice to have a log line. On the other sense, if you have someone who is going to read your script, and it's sometimes better if they just are totally blind to the subject matter and they go in and just read it. They just start and go through it. Because when you think about it, a trailer to a movie is not a log line. It's not a synopsis. It's not telling you the whole story. It's cherry picking what the production people, whoever, are in charge of making the trailer, what they perceive as what will draw an audience's attention and hence get them into the theater or to watch the show on TV. And I don't really know, I guess I hadn't thought of it too much, who decides the content of a trailer, if that's in the director's contract, whether he or she has any say in it, or has complete say in it, has no say in it. I'm not really sure how that works. Certainly the screenwriter does it, unless it's, a written, produced, directed, which, speaking of that, I have made trailers for the 3 films that I've made, And I don't remember how easy they came together, but I do remember that it was kind of fun. And um, I'd have to go back and look at them to see if I think they're successful. I know the one for The Key, for whatever reason, on YouTube has got, I forgot how many I should look, but thousands and thousands of views, the trailer. I don't know why, and I haven't looked at the analytics to see how much time people have spent watching it, how much time the average person has. But what is the point? The point is that get back to my original thought of the dialogue and the times when you're just trying to improve it because you know the scene works, or other times when you're not sure that it works. And so I guess what had been talking about is if you completely outline it, index cards, and you've got every single scene and you've got notes of here's what happens to happen, here's what has to happen in this scene from beginning to end, here's how it moves the story along. But then once you get into writing it, it doesn't always seem to go that way. Maybe that's because I don't do a good enough job with my outlines or index cards or whatever. I would love to see, which I guess is one of the reasons I delved into this docudrama, of seeing how other people do it, because you can read books and you can hear interviews, but that is just such a surface, which it has to be given the medium. It's a very surface telling. It doesn't really show you from day to day how they're making progress on their script or what they're doing. So I think that would be interesting. And someone on the Screenwriting Facebook page mentioned starting a podcast, and I had looked into that, not to do it myself necessarily, but there are a lot of podcasts out there. John August, whose name is familiar to me. I don't know if he wrote a book or if he's in the industry. I think that's his name, and I think he's done some scripts, but he had on a guest. Oh, I got to think what he wrote. He worked on Parks and Rec. That was his main thing, The Office and Parks and Rec and other stuff. And that is interesting to hear. But again, you don't get into the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of how a person actually works on a script. And of course, writing sitcoms, I'm not saying it's easier or harder. It's completely different than writing a screenplay. So it's not like you're going to learn your craft necessarily from that person, but it's super interesting to listen to. So where does that leave us? That leaves us on page 77, and I'm just going to go to something additional. Let you go. So yeah, I'm thinking of how realistic it is for Lexi to make this offer or this statement that if I am his kid, I'm going to agree to go with him on the condition he lets you go. They've known each other for a couple of hours, 3 hours, and as typically happens in screenplays and movies, a lot happens in a concentrated period of time, and really that's pretty much the point. There are scripts that take place over several years or something, or more than that, and that's always interesting to me because most of my three that I've made, The Key takes place almost not in real time because it's not a 12-hour long movie, but it takes place in the course of just over 12 hours, other than the beginning, which is 12 years prior. And the end of Art takes place over the period of maybe a month. And We Know Care takes place over the period of 2 or 3 weeks. But my point is, regardless of the actual time period or time frame, things in the script have to happen in a very compact and condensed way, because when people really, fall in love, unless it's super extreme circumstances, which again, maybe it is in a movie, it takes way, 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 way longer, which is one of the reasons why, to me, like romantic comedies, unless they're done super well, which some are, it's just hard for me to believe that people really fall in love that fast. Or like I saw West Side Story, and that was basically a love at first sight, kind of like, I guess, Romeo and Juliet. And I get the conceit that it has to happen that way, but I just, if you don't buy into it, then obviously you're not going to buy into the movie, which it was well made and pretty to look at and everything, but literally as soon as they have that first dance, they're basically in love, and that just seems kind of wacky to me. Excuse me. I wish it was. So, like the dialogue on page, the top of page 78, that's, it's kind of, no, I'm kind of changing it, but you get sort of where I'm going in there, that can they be that attracted to each other or care about each other so much in such a short period of time? And yet, having said that, it frequently happens in the movies and people keep going to see them. So maybe I shouldn't worry so much about that. But then, so I had that initial statement by Jake, and now I'm getting into sort of this big, deep conversation, which again might be interesting. If anything, maybe interesting to me as the writer to explore these characters a little more, but will it be interesting enough for the audience that I can justify leaving it in, especially at this point in the script? Because if I'm really on page 78, this is 24-ish pages from the end, so it's pretty close to the third act, and is this something they should be discussing? And I believe that's something that I realized, probably not right here, or I wouldn't still be writing it, but I have realized that I'm sort of over budget in terms of the structure and what should happen by what point. Just realized that some of my sentences are run-on sentences, period. I guess that's the tendency when people talk, period. I should say period every time in a sentence. That would consciously make you think to end your sentence, period. But I won't keep doing it because it's probably annoying. So they have this, again, this might be interesting kind of in the backstory or for my knowledge, if this really did happen. But I mean, I don't really like it. But you don't know. You don't know if you don't like it until you write it. So apologizing, as I seem to do, doesn't really make any sense because there you go. I just deleted some stuff. So, yeah, we're exploring all these kind of character flaws or things, but as we know, it's better to show than to tell, and I've got a lot of telling, I feel like, in this script, and that in itself is telling. Ooh, isn't that clever? So now she's kind of getting into whining. So, gosh, it's so hard because you don't like weak characters, even though, she's had this upbringing and she's not unstable. She might be a little fragile. She might be whatever, but you don't want her to be weak. And so that's a tricky thing, because if someone is a total victim, will the audience root for them? Will the audience perceive in this case, Lexi just to be not worth, quote, saving? Will they feel extra bad? Obviously, if it's a 2-year-old kid who has no means of defense, taking care of herself, then that's one thing. But in this case, I guess that's an ongoing struggle for me of how not really clever, how resourceful, how proactive will people be more inclined to root for her if, even though she's not escaping, she can aid somehow, she can give clues. And so that's something that I'm working on in the present day. But back when I'm writing this, I'm pretty much, as you see, wrapped up in the script and exactly what's going on. So then we've got Hogan going to, originally Hogan went to the house, the cabin of that lady, and there was that kind of supposedly funny scene, which I realized was kind of stupid. And so I thought, well, what if he went straight to the right cabin, because they got the information from the lady who's in the nature center. So Hogan's going to go in there. And I sort of like this, I must say, and I don't know if this will survive, but I kind of like this. It's not really humorous, but I think it's a little bit novel, a little bit unexpected how Hogan goes about doing this. And of course, did he learn this from his military training? Does he just spin good yarns, or exactly what? So don't know for sure how that's going to go, but just thinking I did about 3 pages worth or so. But the day's over. Day 197 in the books. Thanks for being there with me.